As we've been having this conversation, a statement has come now from Donald Trump about this. So this is just in. I want to read this. I'm going to read this in part. There's the top of it just reads like a Twitter rant, so I'm going to kind of get to about a paragraph into it. It says, so now, for more than 2 years, New York City has been looking at almost every transaction I've ever done, including seeking tax returns, which were done by among the biggest and most prestigious law and accounting firms in the U.S. The Tea Party was treated far better by the IRS than Donald Trump. The Supreme Court never should have let this fishing expedition happen, but they did. This is something which has never happened to a president before. It is all Democrat inspired in a totally Democrat location, New York City and state, completely controlled and dominated by a heavily reported enemy of mine, Governor Andrew Cuomo. These are attacks by Democrats willing to do anything to stop the almost 75 million people, the most votes by far ever gotten by a sitting president, who voted for me in the election, an election which many people and experts feel that I won. I agree. Just a fact check there. That's not true. Going on here, the new phenomenon of headhunting prosecutors and AGs who try to take down their political opponents using the law as a weapon is a threat to the very foundation of our liberty. That's what is done in third world countries. Even worse are those who run for prosecutorial or attorney general offices in far left states and jurisdictions, pledging to take out a political opponent. That's fascism, not justice, and that is exactly what they are trying to do with respect to me, except that the people of our country won't stand for it. In the meantime, Trump says here, murders and violent crime are up in New York City by record numbers and nothing is done about it. Our elected officials don't care. All they focus on is the persecution of President Donald J. Trump. I will fight on, just as I have for the last 5 years, even before I was successfully elected, that part in parentheses. Despite all of the election crimes that were committed against me, we will win. Where to start? Where to start here, Tristan? But let's say this is where I will start, which is he's blaming New York, but this is a Supreme Court decision, which, and this must sting for Donald Trump, includes three of his appointees,
count 'em.
Nominees.
This sounds exactly like what he said. He went on Twitter to rant about the Trump University case when we first filed it against him in 2013. He said all the same stuff. He's literally just repeating himself, except now he's not limited to 280 characters anymore. So before, he'd have to do like 2 tweets in a row, and I think it reined him in a little bit. That was a super long statement. Now he doesn't have a word limit anymore, a character limit. He can just go on and on and on. I feel bad for you having to read it.
Well, I do think brevity was his friend before because it sort of focused his messaging. I will certainly agree with you on that.
Yeah, he
John,
needs to hire an editor.
What is your reaction, John, to this statement?
Well, I think he's actually been lucky. His reaction is kind of delayed. This case was really decided in July by a 7-2 vote, where the Supreme Court said, as president, he is not immune from a state prosecutor and a state grand jury seeking his records. This all is from a body of law that was created by Nixon during Watergate, and just a following up on that. He had the right under that July decision to appeal the breadth and any other particulars about the case, which he did, and lost in 2 lower federal courts before it went back to the Supreme Court. They sat on it for almost 4 months to issue a 16-word sentence that said, we're not interested in this case, It's over. They gave him a break during the election because this could have come up pre-election and created a problem for him. So that helped everybody to have it not a political issue during the election.
Ellie, I'm starting with you. All right, so in a couple of days, Cy Vance has these documents. What can he do with these tax returns, and can he use them for cases, outside of the current scope?
Sure, Brooke. So these tax returns are going to be key evidence in the Manhattan DA's investigation. The crux of the investigation here is whether the Trump organization intentionally inflated or deflated the value of their assets. For example, when they applied for bank loans, did they sort of drum up the value of their real estate holdings, their revenues, that kind of thing? And then when they applied for their tax refunds or put in their taxes, did they intentionally deflate the value of their assets. The way you would find that is see those tax returns. So I assure you, the prosecutor's office knows exactly where those tax returns fit into their case. They could be a crucial piece of evidence. We'll see what's on the tax returns themselves. Well, we won't, but Cy Vance will see what's on the tax returns themselves, and that'll guide his investigation.
Quick follow-up. Can Trump and his legal team appeal this whole thing?
It's all but over. Look, it turns out 6 times is the charm. Believe it or not, Donald Trump has lost this case 6 times in the federal courts. As Jessica just said, it's going to be a matter of hours or days before those returns are in the DA's hands, and he'll do with them what a prosecutor would do.
Instead, obviously, we remember back to when Donald Trump had promised to release his tax returns, right, when he was running for president, said he would release them after, I'm air quoting, the audit. I was looking on Twitter and I saw former Congresswoman Barbara Comstock. She floated this idea. She said perhaps one way to stop Trump from running for president again would be to pass a law requiring full disclosure of personal and business tax records. Do you think enough members could get behind that, A, and B, if he is serious about running again, could this tax return issue actually become a bigger deal next time?
What you hear kind of quietly from Republicans is that in the absence of them having the kind of political courage to speak out against Donald Trump, they're hoping basically that prosecutors do that for them, that this kind of becomes a big enough issue that the people who are hoping to take over the Republican Party from Donald Trump, in the back of their head and kind of off record and on background, they're saying, well, look at these legal issues, and that may be what stops him. I think what former Congresswoman Comstock is saying is just floating that out loud, saying that the Congress could potentially pass a law. I remember some Democrats on the trail talking about this to make sure that the next, that any type of nominee would have to open their tax returns, and that will potentially bar Donald Trump. But we have seen Democrats not really willing to make that kind of proactive step. A lot of Democrats are kind of uneasy of looking like they are proactively trying to bar Trump from running from office, and we know Republicans haven't stood up on that front. I think it's going to be unlikely that we see that type of proactive effort from Congress. I think what is more likely is either the legal questions kind of engulf him to the point where he cannot run, or he is kind of free to do what we already know he can, which is overtake that Republican primary where he still enjoys significant popularity.
Speaking of looking into the future, Ron Brownstein, this is for you. Despite the fact that Donald Trump was acquitted for inciting an insurrection like 5 minutes ago, Axios is reporting that Trump plans to, speak at CPAC next weekend to talk to Republicans and basically tell them that he is the presumptive 2024 nominee. First of all, what? And second of all, what do you do if you're Mitch McConnell?
Yeah, I mean, look, this is, first of all, the situation is really almost without historic precedent. Someone tweeted the other day, and I think they're right. Think of the last one-term president who was defeated, who retained significant influence in his own party. Not George H.W. Bush, not Jimmy Carter, not Herbert Hoover, not William Howard Taft, not even Benjamin Harrison. In the 19th century, you might have to go back to before the Civil War and Martin Van Buren to find a precedent. And the fact is that Trump does retain significant, as Steve said, in the Republican Party. In the polling, about 3/4 of Republicans still want him to play a prominent role going forward. The problem the party has is that 1/5 to 1/4 of Republican voters who say they don't want to see a party stamped by and defined by Trump is plenty to cause them enormous electoral problems if, in fact, the party defers to Trump and they pull away. I will say that in practice, the divide is kind of less than it appears in kind of the rhetoric, because, for example, you're seeing in all of these states, from Arizona to Georgia to Wisconsin and Pennsylvania, Florida, Montana, efforts by state-level Republicans using Trump's discredited claims of fraud to impose this incredible new wave of voter suppression. So the party is kind of unifying in a Trumpian direction, even as it argues over his personal role in that forward progress.
Let me also help you further your point, and then, Ali, I'm coming to you. I saw this new Suffolk University USA Today poll found that despite Trump's second impeachment, 46% of Republicans say they will abandon the Republican Party and join Trump if he starts a new political party. So keep that simmering in all of our heads. Ellie, here's what I really want to know. Back to this whole, tax issue. We know the taxes will be subject to grand jury secrecy rules that will, respect restrict their actual public release. When could the public ever actually be able to see Trump's taxes?
So two ways, Brooke. First of all, if the Manhattan DA brings a charge and that charge goes to trial, the exhibits, the evidence that's used at a trial, that becomes part of the public record. The second way, let's remember, there's a second lawsuit going on here where the congressional committees are trying to get their hands on Donald Trump's tax returns. Now, if that happens, how quickly does Congress leak? I think you could probably count that in a matter of hours. So keep an eye on that lawsuit as well. That's probably the quicker path for those tax returns to hit the public.